Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the Film Florida podcast. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. The Film Florida podcast is free, but if you like what you hear, please consider going to our website and donating $20.21 for our 2021 fundraising campaign. We also have a Film Florida merchandise page. Visit filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. Elayne Schneiderman Schmidt is a Florida film industry treasure. From Miami Vice in the 1980s to her most recent work on a series of made-for-TV romance films, Elayne has worked on more than 40 films and television series, most of them in Florida, including The Birdcage, Moonlight, and The Florida Project, just to name a few. We talk about her loyalty to and her love of filming in Florida, what attracts her to projects, and her advice for the next generation of industry professionals in Florida. Here's my conversation with Elayne Schneiderman Schmidt. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Elayne.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So let's start with your origin story. How did you get started in the industry?
Actually, I was just in the right place at the right time. A friend of mine, we were graduating college, both directing students. I was both psychology and theater major, and we were both directing. And she was on a commercial and asked me to bring something to the set for her. And when I got there, she wasn't there. She was out on a run, and I knew nothing about the business at all. And so I had to wait. And by the time she got there and I went to leave, the producer came over and offered me $50 to stay for the day and help load coolers and be a PA. To me at the time, that was a lot of money. And
Sure.
I jumped at it. I was super excited. It was a Reggie Jackson, I think it was a Magnavision commercial.
Okay.
With Kim Wolf. And just kept going from there. She kept calling, I kept going.
Well, I want to talk through a couple specific projects on your resume. I mean, looking at your credits in your career, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, your big break was serving as an assistant to the producers on Miami Vice, the TV series back in the 1980s. How did you get that job? And talk about how important that was to kind of lay the groundwork for the rest of your career.
Was in the right place at the right time. A good friend of mine, exactly the same friend who I was helping on that job, which Maria Chavez, got on to Miami Vice as a PA that day. And she brought me on. Michael Mann had sent down a photographer who had, and since then became his visual consultant, one of his associate producers and everything he does. And my job was just to drive him around for a couple of days. And we all became good friends. And through him, I met the producers, I met everybody else. And for some reason, everybody seemed to get sick in the producer's office all at the same time. And there was nobody left. So they called me in. And I had never been in a production office at the time. I had only done commercials and whatnot. But I said, sure, I can do it. And I did it. And I didn't realize I was saying yes to working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. But they liked me, they kept me on, and I had a great work ethic. I didn't know then you couldn't say no, work needs to be done. I took off one Sunday a month and slept around the clock. But from there, I just, I left the show after the first year. My first day was the first day of filming, so nobody knew that it was a hit show yet. Nobody knew it had legs or where it was going to head. But after the first year, I got married and left the show, which turned out great because I was able to do all of the spin-off, Michael Mann shows, John Nicolella, even Don Johnson shows. I was available to do their shows, so I did that kept me going. And I just started getting phone calls from there. And about 20 years later, I looked at it one day and said, I guess I'm in the film business. Yes, this is my career.
Yeah. And now over the next 10 years after that stint on Miami Vice, you worked on a number of noteworthy projects as the production coordinator, in general. And I want to pick one of my favorites is The Birdcage. So talk about what you did on that film and what it was like to work with the likes of Robin Williams and Gene Hackman, Nathan Lane, and the rest of that just amazing cast.
It was an amazing experience. When I have to pick one film out of my career that stands out, it's Birdcage. It's also my favorite movie to watch out of the movies I've made. But they were just all so wonderful to work with. And there was such a great positive vibe on the show. I mean, we were doing a lot of work around the clock, shut down South Beach. We had it rigged from one end of South Beach all the way down to the other end, and all the stars. But even like in between takes, Robin was so approachable. He loved children and elderly people, and he'd stop and talk to everyone. And it was just an amazing amount of energy on the set at all times. Mike Nichols was also very interesting to work with, and Elaine May. To me, they were icons at the time, and having been in theater, I knew who they were. So I was very excited to get to know them and be part of that world. But it was also very exciting because I was given an opportunity to get involved in designing like that opening sequence, that shot where you came in off the space cam onto a crane into the birdcage. And it was amazing at that time because I'm learning and working with some of the best in the industry side by side and seeing how decisions get made. And they were all just very, very wonderful to me and wonderful to work with.
Yeah. And so, as we're talking about your career timeline now here, right now we're talking about 1999, 2000s. And by that time, you had built an impressive list of credits and you've moved up the chain of command on sets. And I'm sure you had the opportunity to move to New York or Los Angeles. What kept you in Florida?
I love Florida. I think Florida is paradise, and I still feel that way. I've lived various parts of the state. I now live up by Crystal River, which is old Florida, and all the springs and whatnot. I think it's just an amazing place to live. I raised children here. I had opportunities to move to LA. I had opportunities to move to New York. I didn't want to raise my children there. Besides, I'm from New York, so I'm an East Coast person, and I didn't want to be far away from my family. But I liked being anonymous in between shoots. If you go to LA and you go out to dinner, everybody, the waiter, everybody has a script to sell you, and that's all you do. When I'd finish a movie in Florida, I'd go out and be totally anonymous and just be a mom or just be whatever and not have to live with the business in day in and day out. As it was, you're working 70 plus hours a week. In Florida, I always felt like when I'm off, I'm really off. It takes me about, not even 30 seconds to make the transition from being crazy and working to being relaxed and enjoying the sun and going to the beach.
That's a great point. And so I'm sure in that time frame from Miami Vice to the next 15 years, was such a great learning experience. Did you have a specific mentor or someone that kind of took you under their wing? And what was the most important thing that you learned during that time?
I had a couple of mentors. The first one being actually John Nicolella, who was one of the producers on Miami Vice. His nickname was Captain Chaos. He was a larger-than-life guy from the streets of New York Italian guy. And so he was just very, very animated and, very much on the Michael Mann whirlwind of the show becoming super hot. But the one thing he taught me that I've never forgotten is if you're in his circle and whatnot, he takes very good care of the people who are close to him, but he'll always tell people to their face what's going on. So you never had to wonder. If he had to fire someone, they knew why. If whatever it was, he would tell people and he never fell short. He didn't blame it on anyone else. The buck always stopped there. And that's something I respected because you always knew what you were getting, at least was as much of the truth as you're going to get. In this industry. And to me, that's really important that we never lose sight of the fact that people we're working with are people first. And I don't know what I owe anyone, but I think my first obligation to people I work with, work for me, is the honesty. Is we owe each other the truth, whatever it looks like, and then we can move on from there. So I learned that from him. And then I had another mentor. I've done 3 movies with Christian Carr-Strubik, who's now a bigwig, I think, at Universal. Okay. The first movie we did together was Ali, which was a huge film. And she was the first female UPM, who knew how to put Teamsters in that place. She knew more about trucks than any of the drivers. And she treated everyone with so much respect that you couldn't help but love her. But she also knew enough about each department that she could admit what she didn't know and be comfortable with it. So she was always learning. Then she came back and we did the Shirley MacLaine movie, In Her Shoes, together. And we did, I'm sorry, Red Eye, which was a Wes Craven film. But each time, and again, my biggest lessons as far as how to treat people, that yes, the money is the most important thing I do as far as breakdowns and sticking to it. But she always spoke to people with respect. She always learned something besides what she was bringing into the conversation. She always got something out of it. And to me, those are invaluable tools because I keep learning every day. There's so much I don't know. And I get to work with so many brilliant people that I'd be cheating myself if I didn't learn from them.
Those are some great takeaways. I mean, I've always said that understanding how to work with people, it will always be the most important thing. You can be the most talented person in the world, but if you're a jerk or you can't communicate well, people are just not going to be around you. Even if you don't know things, if you're pleasant about it and you're respectful about it, people are going to be fine helping you and teaching you through those things. And so the people skills, I think, are what sometimes people miss more than anything in our industry. They're so worried about the technical skills and whether they can light something the best or shoot something the best. That's all fine and dandy. But if you can't relate to people, it makes it really hard to work with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially we work at such an accelerated speed. We don't get months and months of getting to know people. It's like you hit the ground running and you all have to be on the same page really fast and move together as a whole, even though there's 100 of you.
Yeah. So getting back to some of the specific projects, between 2000 and 2015, you worked on more than 20 different projects, mostly as a production manager, production supervisor, or line producer. And then around 2015, you get hired as a line producer for an independent film being shot in Miami. And so how did you get connected with Moonlight during that time in the production? And what were your first impressions of the film when you first got around it?
Well, my very first impression was the first time I had been called about it. They obviously didn't have very much money. It was a low budget movie being shot in Miami. And I'm not a Miami local. And their first offer to me was to work as a local for very little money. I read the project, I liked it. I just didn't think I could, to work as a local and for their low amount of pay. And so I turned it down. They hired another line producer and they hired a person I referred, Jennifer Radzikowski, who was amazing. And she UPM'd it. Well, the other line producer had a family member who got very ill and she had to leave town immediately. So Jennifer called and when it was a favor, I stayed with some friends, I made it work. And when I met Adele and Barry, I was just so happy to be part of their dream. I really was. They were lovely people. Very, very, every dime went in front of the camera. It wasn't like a low budget movie where you have people staying in penthouses while the crew is, they legitimately were making this movie from their heart and they put everything they had into the film. And I'm very, very proud to have even been considered to be part of that film. It was beautiful.
Well, and at what point in the process did you have any idea that the film was going to be what it ended up being? I mean, did you see it coming, or was there a moment in production where you thought, what, this is really a special film?
I'd have to say yes to knowing or feeling this is a special film, but I'd have to say I have no idea that it was going to do what it did. I've given up trying to guess those things. I'm so bad at it. After the first episode of Miami Vice, I said, "Oh, the show's never going to go." So, and that was probably the worst episode of the season. But it just goes to show you, I don't know. There are people paid a lot of money who are supposed to know these things, and we don't. It's your best guess. Some of my favorite TV shows I've worked on got canceled after 6 episodes. So I try to refrain from that. I mean, we all do our best guesses based upon actors and statistics, but But really, as we all know, at the end of the day, all of a sudden, and not saying Moonlight did deserve all the attention it got, the awards it got. It was a beautiful film. But when you're filming a film like that, you don't know, because it's in Barry's head, it's in the DP's head. There's too much of it to really be able to say, I see where this is going, and it's tremendous. It's so many films are like that you're working on. There are movies I've worked on that I thought were going to, hit it out of the ballpark and couldn't sell. It's the nature of our business.
Yeah. And then, so as the film starts getting limited release and getting really good feedback, it kind of snowballed from there. I mean, as that whole process of the award season was going, I mean, what were you thinking? And then there was actually some talk about, the Oscars. I remember hearing about that and I thought, wow, that would be amazing, but really? And it just kind of kept going. So
I felt very similar. As much as I love the movie, it's still sometimes hard to believe that a little bit of indie is going to go as far as it went.
Sure.
And as it got attention and as it was getting, more and more noticed for the film it was and heading to the Oscars, we were all pleasantly surprised, but it was really exciting. So how often do you get to work on a movie that's, $1.2 million that can go that far?
Right. Right.
And a lot of people try, and there's wonderful scripts out there and wonderful movies, but they just don't get the legs. That just I don't know why all the right elements come together on one film and make the magic happen so beautifully. And it's not like you could package that and sell it. If you're lucky, if it happens once or twice in your career.
Yeah, you catch lightning in a bottle and you don't complain about it. You just go along for the ride.
I like that analogy a lot.
So, just a year or two after Moonlight, you're brought on to another amazing independent film here in Florida, the Florida Project. How did you get connected to that film? And then talk about that experience.
That was a very interesting experience. Sean Baker, I don't remember how he had gotten my name, but one of his producers had called me. They were in Orlando scouting. So I drove over there for the day and we met. And they talked to me. There was no script at the time. I don't know if we ever really had a script. Sean, as I don't know, or not, Baker is an amazing independent filmmaker.
Yes.
But he's a total artist. About every moment, every inch of his films are his total creativity. And he doesn't always able to even tell you what that's going to look like ahead of time. But we talked about the concept and I loved it. I loved the idea of actually showing the plight of these poor families and the children who are growing up under these circumstances. And we had some great conversations about it. That was, I think, in August. Then in September, which he didn't mention at the time, he went and shot Tangerine on an iPhone. And that got him all kinds of acclaim because it was the first film done on an iPhone. It was also a really beautifully done film. And it was very, very edgy and very different. And it created a very large fan base for Sean and his type of work. So when this film came up, now all of a sudden, Tangerine was like a $200,000 budget, which we did with 7 producers, and they all wore different hats on the crew. And now all of a sudden we're doing the Florida Project, and he has his choice of financiers pretty much. And he decides to shoot it in 35 millimeter anamorphic film. Besides, the lenses, and totally opposite of being an iPhone.
Right.
It was a tremendous undertaking. But I've never worked with anyone like him before, and I don't know if I ever will. Everything is just so completely organic to him. But he has this way of just bringing you along on his dream. And I don't mean, from financiers down to cameramen. He just gets you, and he has a way of just communicating to something inside of you. And you just want to go on his dream. You want to follow on that journey. And I was glad I did. We met in August, but we didn't make the film until the following May. And we shot for 7 weeks in Kissimmee. It was hard in a way. The shoot, out of all the films I've made, I say that took the most amount of heart because of what we were dealing with all day, even though, these kids were beautiful and We're shooting out on a tarmac in summer, 114 degrees on the black tarmac. But you're dealing with these, families that are really hurting, and children who are hurting, and people who aren't eating enough. And as much as you can do, and as much as we gave, and the crew would give, and we'd all kept trying, it's a drop in the bucket. And all you can do is show this reality, but, and hoping that in itself can help. But you just felt so hopeless so many times, because no matter what we did, it's just a drop in the bucket. Right. But it was interesting. The day before we started shooting, the city of Kissimmee rescinded all of our film permits. They decided, it's like some commissioner who was not there we had been there for months because we had a big car crash, so we were rerouting traffic, we've been talking to people. And the day before we started shooting, one of the commissioners read our script maybe for the first time, and decided that we would be a financial hardship on the city of Kissimmee, and rescinded all our film permits.
Wow.
Which you can't really do on the basis of content. And, we were making this up. We couldn't help the fact there are a lot of motels in Kissimmee that have homeless families. So it took a lot of lawyers, and we lost a day of shooting, but we ended up getting our permits back. And it was a struggle. I've never had that happen.
Yeah.
All of our film permits were rescinded and 5:00 in the afternoon before we started shooting.
Wow.
Crazy.
Well, we've had Sean Baker and Brooklyn on separate episodes of the Film Florida podcast in previous seasons. So I kind of feel like we've gotten a pretty good sense of the behind the scenes. But that's the first I had heard about the permitting thing. So that's an amazing story.
I'm glad you have Brooklyn on. She's a little star. She's really
she is
a lady.
Yep, and we actually had her on while she was in Vancouver. Currently filming her current project. I think it was in, I was in season 3 of the podcast. I don't remember. It was in the first half of it, I think, is when we had her. So we got her. She squeezed us in. It was so kind of her to take the time. She literally was, we had to do it on a Sunday afternoon because it was the only time she wasn't filming. So it was really nice of her. And then Sean Baker was so kind to take us through kind of his whole behind the scenes thinking of the Florida project. And we talked a lot about Tangerine as well. And then his film that is getting a lot of talk right now, he was just in the early stages of that. So now to kind of see that full circle has been kind of interesting. But Elayne, in the last few years, you've sort of become the guru of, the Bay Area made-for-TV romance films. Make sure I have the titles correct. We have True Love Blooms, we have Love in the Sun, and then most recently we have South Beach Love for Hallmark. And then separately, we have A Taste of Love as well. And talk about the formula that has made these films so successful for the Bay Area.
Romantic comedies are fun to shoot in a lot of ways. So, you're not reinventing the wheel. Everything's happy, 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 pretty, pretty, pretty. And they're fun because you're not reinventing the wheel. But what you are doing is you're spreading love and romance and all the feel-good things that are totally the opposite of the Florida Project. I don't go out seeking a certain genre of film. But because the Bay Area they have incentives, they will incentivize your project to a certain amount. It leaves you in a budget area that's still kind of a low budget. It's workable, but when you can shoot a romantic comedy in, let's say, 15 days, you need a thrill of 20, 25 days. So for a smaller budget show that you can shoot in 15 days and do a quality film, and with the amount of money we get incentivized between Hillsborough and Pinellas County, it's competitive then instead of going to Georgia or somewhere else with an incentive. But it's also, the Bay Area is just so picturesque. It's cinemagraphically amazing. No matter, what era, what year, whatever you're trying to show, it exists there. There's not a location here you can't find. And the city itself, both counties, just really love the film business. I have, in every film I've done here, we have store owners coming in offering us, people want to make us parties, people, not wanting to even charge us to shoot there. And it's the business side of what we do is, is we're competing with 30% incentive in Georgia.
Right.
But what we get that people don't is that somebody will give us free production offices or free parking or whatever. We get in goodwill makes up, and it does turn into dollars in the big picture when you're budgeting things. It makes it possible to greenlight a $2 million movie because you add your incentive to it. It's doable. You could still do a union film in that budget range. But you got to be careful. There's not a lot of movies with genres you can shoot as successfully in a 15-day shoot, which is dictated by your budget, obviously. So.
Right. Well, and through your entire career, most projects that you've worked on have been in Florida. And so when someone calls you about a project, I'm sure they ask if they should film in Florida or maybe go somewhere else. I mean, what do you say to convince them to film in Florida or to give Florida a chance in terms of from a budget standpoint, because the incentives are challenging? What is, your pitch to get them to come to Florida?
Number one, we still have phenomenal crews here. So, I have friends who are working up in Atlanta, and their availability for crew is tough. You can't find crew who's going to work for scale. And again, we're dealing with lower budget movies here because we don't have the incentive.
Right.
So but every one of my movies go union because I believe very strongly in my crew getting their benefits. Everybody deserves that. So I have wonderful crew members who aren't getting their health benefits paid because there's no union work. So by doing work here, you're helping people get their union days, even though they make a little less. And you still have top-notch crews and your vendors, everybody. I think at this point, we're all more appreciative for the work. I know for me, every time I greenlight something in Florida, I'm just so grateful because I know how hard it is, and we're also grateful to stay home, raise our families here and not have to be upheaved to move, Of course, you're young and starting out. If you want to do, the Marvel and the big films, well, you have to go somewhere else. But I believe filmmaking's alive and well in Florida, with or without an incentive. And there's no place I would rather work.
Excellent. I mean, at this point in your career, though, you are able to pick and choose what projects you work on. When someone approaches you about a project, what are you looking for? What makes you say yes, as opposed to, a project that you just pass on?
It's hard. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes, I just met with someone before this, just had lunch with somebody who offered me a job when I didn't think I wanted to do a job right now. I just did 2 movies back to back and I'm tired.
Yep.
But there's certain, times where all of a sudden the phone rings and the adrenaline starts going and you start pumping and it's a good script. This happens to be a really good script. So in your head, I'm already, we could do this, already planning it out. But there are certain basics. I won't do a movie that's not union. So with that in mind, that creates my bottom line. I always tell my crew I won't shoot them in the foot. I'm never going to give them more equipment than they have crew to handle or not enough.
Yep.
Everybody, I try to hire the best at what they do. And usually our keys have a lot of experience and sometimes have to train the people young under them because we don't have tremendous budgets, but we have good people who are willing to do that. And it's fun when you get to watch some of the really seasoned technicians working with young ones and getting them into the unions. And the next year you come back and now they're full force grips or they're in the art department. And, I'm bringing in fewer and fewer people to the area. I used to have to bring in 3/4 of my crew from other areas. And, we're building up this crew base here in the Tampa Bay area and I love it.
Yeah. Well, so then the last question is kind of the obligatory one. If somebody wants to follow in your footsteps, what's the best advice you give to an up-and-coming industry professional?
The best advice I can give is to work. Work no matter what, even if it's for free, no matter what. Staying home, you're not going to learn, you're not going to make connections, and you're not going to network. There was this girl that had been calling me for months. And we had met once briefly, and I really didn't have time to interview her. And I had a show opening up, but you only get a couple of PA positions. And so I kept kind of putting her off and telling her I need people of experience. And then she called and we were moving into the office that day. She shows up at my office in clothes, ready to start moving, starts moving furniture, starts putting things all over, starts cleaning. And she was so great. Within a couple of days of working for free, I hired her and she took off from there. It's that kind of, go to work, show up, volunteer to help somebody, it's the best way to get to know people. And this way you're more comfortable when you're in an environment where you know some more faces and familiar faces, you shine more because you're more comfortable. Yeah. I really do believe in the internship. I believe if you're getting out of college, you have no way to compete for the jobs without having done some serious intern work. And if you're not working and you're not making money and there's a shoot going on, do it again. It's a lot better. For me personally, I know the worst thing I can do when I'm in a slump and not get any work is just sit home.
Right.
As soon as I say yes to a job, even if it's not a job I might have done when I wasn't out of work or whatever, my phone starts ringing. Energy breeds energy, work breeds work. And I've seen it in my own life, and I advise people that way. Go out and just do just be busy, create energy, meet people, talk to people. It all comes full circle eventually.
Great advice. I actually agree 100%. So Elayne, I know how busy your schedule has been, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and be with us on the Film Florida podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking, John. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're not already a member, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider going to our website and donating $20.21 for our 2021 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com. And please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.